She hadn't said a word, hadn't broken a rule, hadn't even looked the wrong way. And yet there she was, being dragged out of her first-class seat in front of a plane full of strangers, just because she was black. Not loud, not dangerous, just black. The flight attendant didn't flinch, the passengers barely blinked, and security acted like it was routine. 1 minute she was quietly buckling her seatbelt, the next she was being escorted down the aisle like a criminal. But what none of them knew, what made this moment far more dangerous than they realized, was who they had just humiliated. This isn't just a story about a seat on a plane. This is about the line between privilege and prejudice, and what happens when someone the system tries to erase turns out to be the very person that system depends on to function. You think you know what's coming, but trust me, you don't. So tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what do you think happens next? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if this already hooked you, and make sure you subscribe, because once the truth takes off, there's no turning back. Vanessa Carter waited calmly in line at gate 37, passport in one hand, phone in the other, dressed in a cream blazer and black slacks, the kind of simple elegance that didn't scream for attention but demanded respect. Her black carry-on gleamed at her side, initials VC pressed into the leather handle. She'd taken this route dozens of times, but today had weight. London, a keynote address, sealing a global partnership. She was early, prepared, focused. As she stepped up to the biometric scanner, the blue light pulsed softly. Next guest, the kiosk instructed. Vanessa tilted her chin and looked into the lens. The machine scanned once, then again. Then a soft red alert lit up the screen. Identity not verified, manual review required. She blinked once, then twice. The same error reappeared. Behind her, passengers queued restlessly, but the attendant near the scanner offered a tight corporate smile. "Ma'am, please step aside for manual clearance." Vanessa's brow arched. Why? The woman's voice was syrupy but cold. Sometimes the facial recognition system has trouble verifying newer profiles. Vanessa folded her arms. "My profile is 4 years old, and my face hasn't changed." The woman's smile didn't budge. "It's standard procedure, ma'am. This happens all the time." But Vanessa knew it didn't. Not to people who looked different. She glanced sideways as 2 white businessmen walked up to the scanner. Beep. Green light. Access granted. Smooth as silk. She stepped to the side and checked her flight app again. Everything was perfect. Seat 1A. First class, LAX to Heathrow. She hadn't used points. She paid full fare, just like always. Still, the attendant tapped away at the screen with exaggerated slowness, glancing up at Vanessa with a strange look, half pity, half challenge. Then, from across the gate, Vanessa noticed a gate agent. White mid-30s, khakis too tight, badge swinging, aiming his phone in her direction. Subtle but sloppy. The photo snapped. No flash, but unmistakable. He turned to his co-workers and laughed into his sleeve, whispering something. A second later, a notification popped up on a nearby tablet. A message, thread titled, "Guess who's pretending to be rich today?" Her image filled the bubble. One girl stifled a giggle. Another guy whispered back, "She gonna ask for bottled water next?" Vanessa didn't flinch. She didn't storm. But her jaw set just barely, because it wasn't new, and it wasn't accidental. Moments later, a supervisor in a looser tie and anxious face appeared. "Is there a problem?" The woman at the scanner replied before Vanessa could. "System won't verify her. I was about to page security." The supervisor glanced at the screen, then at Vanessa. Recognition dawned like a sunrise. "Wait, Ms. Carter." She offered no expression. "Vanessa Carter," he repeated, suddenly paler. "Of Carter Global?" Now heads were turning. The giggling agent froze, phone slipping silently into his pocket. The supervisor cleared his throat. "We're so sorry. That's clearly an error. Please, right this way. Priority boarding, of course." Vanessa tilted her head. Voice flat but firm. "Don't rush now. I've got time to be handled properly." The scanner beeped green under his override code. The first-class cabin shimmered with gold accents and leather seating, but as she entered, The movement of those inside seemed to pause, a dozen micro-reactions registering in subtle glances and stiffened shoulders. She approached seat 1A, placed her bag in the overhead bin, and settled gracefully, adjusting the cuff of her blazer as if reclaiming her space with every small movement. Across the aisle, a man in his 60s, silver hair, crisp button-down, and an expensive watch he kept checking compulsively, was gathering trash from the side table of his seat. Without looking up, he said, "Excuse me, miss, would you mind taking this?" and extended an empty espresso cup and a crumpled napkin toward her. Vanessa turned her head slowly, locking eyes with him in stunned silence. "I'm sorry," she asked, her voice controlled but edged with frost. The man blinked, finally registering her tailored clothes and briefcase. "Oh," he muttered. "You're not, oh." He looked away, cheeks flushed pink, mumbling something about poor lighting. Vanessa said nothing. She didn't need to. His embarrassment clung to the air like a sour perfume. Behind them, a child's voice pierced the awkward silence. "Mommy, why is that lady sitting up here?" the little boy asked, pointing directly at Vanessa. "She's brown." The mother, mortified, yanked his hand down and hushed him, whispering something too soft to hear. Vanessa exhaled slowly and glanced out the window, her reflection merging with the tarmac's distant horizon. The air felt thick, almost congealed, as if the walls of first class were closing in. She felt the weight of 20 eyes measuring her worth in real time, some indifferent, some uncertain, one or two even sympathetic, but most hovering in that quiet territory between judgment and denial. One row back, a woman in pearls and a Chanel scarf leaned toward her husband and muttered, "They let anyone in here these days." The man chuckled under his breath, not even bothering to disguise it. Vanessa's fingers closed around the armrest, knuckles white against the leather. She wasn't new to this kind of atmosphere. She'd known its scent since grad school, its tone since her first investor meeting, its rhythm since the first time she walked into a room of powerful men and saw their eyes register her skin before her resume. She wasn't hurt. Not anymore. She was furious. But it was a quiet fury, the kind that burned behind calm eyes and waited for its moment to ignite. Just as she steadied her breath, a voice interrupted the slow murmur of the cabin. "Ma'am, would you like a mimosa before takeoff?" The flight attendant, Rachel, according to her name tag, smiled, though her tone carried that forced brightness Vanessa now recognized as practiced condescension. "We're offering them to our premium guests today." Vanessa tilted her head. "Aren't all first-class passengers premium?" Rachel faltered just a little before responding. "Of course. I just meant, well, if you'd like one." Vanessa smiled without warmth. "Sparkling water is fine." Rachel nodded, turned, and walked away just as the silver-haired man who'd handed her his trash stole another sideways glance and pulled out a tablet, pretending to scroll. The engines whirred to life below them as the crew prepared for departure. Vanessa took a mental inventory of what had already occurred. Denied at the scanner, humiliated in public, mistaken for service staff, pointed at by a child, whispered about like she was a misplaced handbag in a luxury boutique, and they hadn't even left the ground. She opened her phone, tapped out a short message, and sent it to a contact labeled simply Martin LD and Ops. It read, "Watch cabin closely. Attaching names, faces soon. Signal, not yet." Then she closed the phone, leaned back in her seat, and adjusted her scarf. Across the aisle, the little boy's mother offered an apologetic smile, one of those passive expressions meant to absolve herself without accountability. Vanessa didn't return it, not because she was unkind, but because she had no intention of offering comfort to those who refused to confront the discomfort they caused. A moment later, Rachel returned with a drink. "Here you go," she said, placing the glass on the tray. Her fingers lingered just a beat too long, as if hoping for acknowledgement. Vanessa offered a polite nod, but didn't speak. She took the glass, sipped once, and stared ahead. A soft chime sounded above her, followed by a voice over the intercom. "Ms. Carter, would you mind stepping to the galley for a brief moment?" The message, though spoken gently, wasn't a request. Passengers turned again, now curious as to why the same woman who'd already attracted glances was being summoned again. Vanessa stood slowly, checked her scarf in place, and made her way down the narrow aisle to the back of the first-class cabin. In the galley, two crew members waited, Rachel and another attendant with a clipboard and a plastic smile. "Ms. Carter," Rachel began, with that familiar surface politeness that masked something colder underneath. "It appears there's been a seating reassignment." Vanessa stared at her. "Excuse me." The other attendant stepped in. "There was an operational adjustment during pre-flight. Your seat has been reassigned to row 34E. It's..." Vanessa cut him off. "That's a jump seat. Technically, it's a passenger configurable seat in a non-standard location," the woman replied quickly, clearly rehearsed. Vanessa blinked slowly, then pulled her phone from her blazer pocket. She opened the Airline's app. Her original booking still showed seat 1A. Her profile remained Elite Premier Member. But beneath that, a thin red alert had appeared. "Reservation modified. Passenger flagged for secondary review due to disruptive conduct." Vanessa's breath caught. "Disruptive conduct?" she said aloud. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't violated policy. I haven't even asked for anything beyond water." Rachel stepped back slightly. "It's probably just a system note from the gate team," she offered, clearly lying. "Sometimes these things flag incorrectly. So let me get this straight," Vanessa said, voice low and dangerously measured. "The system that couldn't scan my face, the team that giggled while photographing me, and now this, some note that reclassifies me as a disruption, when all I've done is sit in my assigned seat with grace and silence?" The clipboard attendant looked at the floor. Rachel avoided her eyes. Vanessa took a sharp breath. "Tell me exactly who entered that flag." "It's an internal process," Rachel muttered, her poise starting to crack. "Our operations center made the change." "On what grounds?" Vanessa demanded. "Who reported me?" "We don't have access to that detail," the other attendant said, sounding more defensive than apologetic. Vanessa leaned in slightly, her voice a whisper of steel. "Do you know how often this happens to women like me? Do you know what it feels like to be called a threat when all you've done is exist quietly in a space you earned?" The silence was her answer. She turned her phone slightly to capture a screenshot of the app, then swiped over to the security dashboard she had access to through her executive aviation partnership. A few clicks later, a code popped up. "Passenger ID reflag source, internal crew channel." Her blood ran cold. They had done this manually. Someone had entered her ID and triggered a reassignment based on nothing but bias. She tapped a secure messaging line labeled Director Global Ops Martin. The message was short, immediate. "Internal crew flag misuse on Flight 204. Suspect manual override. Request protocol trace." She slid the phone back into her pocket and stood taller. "I'm returning to my seat," she said simply. Rachel stepped forward. "Ms. Carter, I'm afraid that's not, unless you physically restrain me," Vanessa interrupted. "I suggest you let me walk back quietly before this escalates beyond your control." Her tone carried no threat, only certainty. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. As Vanessa turned to walk back down the aisle, a ripple moved through the passengers. Some turned away, unwilling to meet her gaze. Others watched her like a storm slowly rolling in. She reached her seat, sat down, and crossed her legs. 2 rows back, a man whispered, "She's making it a race thing." The woman beside him shook her head. "No, they're making it one." Vanessa ignored them both. She opened her tablet and resumed reviewing her speech slides, but her hands trembled just enough to betray her restraint. The moment when discrimination tried to hide behind a smile, but failed to mask the stench of systemic rot. Rachel had retreated to the galley, but not for long. Moments later, a different flight attendant, young, confident in the smug way of someone who had never been challenged, stepped into the aisle, holding her phone just low enough to not be obvious, but just high enough to capture Vanessa in frame. Her name tag read Brit. Her voice was a whisper laced with mockery as she spoke into the phone, clearly live streaming. "See? Told y'all. Not everyone can fake their way into first class," she said, captioning the stream in real time with, "When affirmative action gets bold on your flight." The screen glowed, hearts and laughing emojis pouring in. Some of us earn our seats, others just sneak in when no one's looking, Britt added, then stifled a smirk. She angled the camera briefly toward her own face, lips puckered in mock sympathy. Pray for the ones who think confidence equals access. Vanessa didn't flinch. She saw it. She heard it. But she refused to give Britt the satisfaction of reacting. Instead, she reached for her phone without looking and swiped open her private monitoring dashboard. Within moments, she had captured the stream URL, screen recorded it, and transmitted it to a cloud-secured evidence folder. Above her, the cabin lights dimmed slightly for takeoff prep, but tension remained thick as smog. 2 rows ahead, a man in a navy pinstripe suit suddenly sat up straighter. He tilted his head, squinted slightly at Vanessa, then tapped his assistant beside him. "Is that who I think it is?" he whispered. The assistant glanced discreetly, then nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Vanessa Carter. Carter Institute. Forbes 40. She's the AI medicine keynote in London." The man exhaled sharply. "I met her last year at the Global Equity Summit. She saved that Alzheimer's trial from collapse." He looked toward the aisle, concern overtaking curiosity. Why is she in the center of this circus? Before his assistant could answer, Rachel appeared again, this time quicker, more alert. She spotted the man standing halfway from his seat and approached with a practiced, low voice. "Sir, please remain seated. We're finalizing pre-flight procedures." The man ignored her. That woman's being harassed. "Are you not aware of who she is?" Rachel's expression didn't change. "Sir," she said, lowering her tone further, "we have flagged concerns about her identity. There's a question of whether the ticket used was appropriately assigned." "That's nonsense," the man replied. "I've seen her at international panels. She's a featured guest on today's World Health Forum." Rachel's smile thinned. "Respectfully, sir, we've encountered cases of impersonation before. Until we confirm her credentials through security, we're asking all passengers to remain compliant." "So let me get this straight," the man said, voice hardening. "You're accusing a globally recognized medical innovator of fraud, while your team live streams her for internet points." Rachel blinked, caught off guard. I wasn't aware of any live stream. You should check with your staff," the man snapped. "Because she just captured your employee mocking her live. And I doubt your PR team is going to enjoy what's about to happen." Rachel turned swiftly, walking back toward the galley, but not before shooting a glare toward Britt, who had abruptly ended her stream and looked down sheepishly at her screen. Vanessa watched it all, her expression unreadable, but her silence weaponized. She knew exactly what was happening. The facade was fracturing, the mask slipping. They weren't just unsure of her, they feared her. Because power, when wrapped in black skin and calm intellect, became something they couldn't predict or contain. She looked out the window again, this time catching her own reflection layered against the horizon. Somewhere out there, her name was being spoken in boardrooms, in policy halls, in contracts worth hundreds of millions. Yet inside this cabin, her existence was still being measured against the narrow lens of what someone like her was supposed to look like. Behind her, the man in the pinstripe suit sat back down, murmuring into his phone. "Call legal. There's going to be blowback on this flight." In the galley, Rachel whispered furiously at Britt, who now looked nervous. A few seats away, someone tweeted a blurry photo of Vanessa with the caption, "Drama in 1A. Whole plane watching. She doesn't even look rattled." Likes exploded. A subtle jolt from the intercom summoned the crew to the front. Rachel disappeared behind the curtain. Moments later, a uniformed security officer stepped quietly into the cabin, followed by 2 others, their vests marked aviation response. They did not rush. They did not speak. One gestured politely toward Vanessa, his face unreadable. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." No cuffs, no threats, just a rehearsed, corporate calm that screamed contain, "Don't escalate." Vanessa stood slowly, her movements deliberate, composed, and with every eye in the cabin locked onto her like she was both spectacle and threat. She handed her tablet to the suited man across the aisle, murmuring, "Hold that. Please don't let it out of your sight." He nodded wordlessly, hands trembling slightly. As she followed the officers through the narrow aisle, the silence was oppressive. No one spoke. No one asked why. No one dared. It was the kind of silence that power demands when it feels most fragile. The moment her heels touched the carpet of the jet bridge, one of the officers radioed in a status code. Vanessa didn't catch the numbers, but she saw the response. A click, then two more, then nothing. The radios in their hands blinked, beeped once, and all three went dark. The officers exchanged glances. One tapped his earpiece, then his shoulder unit. Command confirm, but the channel was dead. They tried again. Silence. Behind them, the door to the aircraft shut with a solid thud. Inside, passengers buzzed with questions, whispers rising. Outside, something else was happening. From every corner of the terminal, airport personnel began moving. Not quickly, but with purpose. Baggage handlers halted mid-lift. Two flight technicians stepped away from the wing. A customer service rep slowly unplugged her headset. One by one, their radios dimmed. Vanessa watched it unfold with eerie calm. This wasn't coincidence. This was protocol, her protocol. She glanced over her shoulder. The suited officer who had escorted her looked disoriented, as if the world had just shifted off-axis, and no one gave him the memo. A woman in a navy blue blazer, maybe mid-20s, approached. Her badge read Op Support. She didn't speak, but as she passed Vanessa, she brushed a folded slip of paper into her palm with the precision of someone trained. Then she kept walking. Vanessa opened it discreetly. One line handwritten. They know who you are. And they're scared. Vanessa didn't smile. She didn't move. But her eyes gleamed with something deeper than pride, calculated momentum. One of the officers turned to her. Ma'am, we were told this was a routine ID verification. Nothing more. Now they've locked us out of our own network. Vanessa met his gaze. That's because you were misused. Like a firewall redirecting a virus. The man looked like he wanted to ask more, but didn't. Somewhere behind them, a door opened sharply and a man in a dark gray executive suit stormed out. He was red-faced, flanked by two women in slim-cut legal attire. Ms. Carter, he barked, forcing a neutral smile that cracked under pressure. We're going to need a few moments of your time to clear up this unfortunate misunderstanding. Vanessa stared at him like she was memorizing every wrinkle in his panic. You'll address me as doctor. And your misunderstanding began the moment your employee opened a camera instead of a protocol handbook. The executive blinked. Of course, Dr. Carter. Please step into the lounge so we can explain. No, Vanessa replied, her voice velvet but lined in iron. You'll speak here, with witnesses, or you won't speak at all. The legal aides hesitated. The taller one leaned in, whispering urgently. The executive's jaw clenched. Very well, he said. There was a communication breakdown. An anonymous tip flagged your ID as mismatched. That's a lie, Vanessa said flatly. The person who entered the manual override has already been logged. And your network is frozen by a backdoor security protocol I personally helped design after your airline received 9 figures of federal AI compliance funding through my institution. Silence. Stunned, stifled silence. Then the shorter legal aide stepped back, her lips parting in a breathless, "She's at Carter." "Yes," Vanessa answered for her. "And you've just activated an audit." The men went pale. Someone behind them dropped a clipboard. A soft buzz vibrated from Vanessa's phone. A message from Martin. Systems locked. Command rerouted to Carter Ops. Legal review in motion. The security team lingered on the periphery, unsure whether to guard her or themselves. Then, as if on cue, the assistant station manager, a man named Garrett, with slicked back hair and a silver tie clip that screamed upper-middle ambition, approached her with the kind of smile meant to seduce rather than resolve. "Dr. Carter," he began smoothly, tone-oiled and professional. "We deeply regret the inconvenience caused by this misunderstanding. We understand your time is valuable, and your presence here has drawn attention we'd all prefer to avoid escalating." He gestured toward a quiet corner of the VIP lounge just beyond the corridor's frosted glass. If you'd be willing, we'd like to offer you a resolution package, immediate transfer to another flight, plus compensation for the error. Vanessa didn't blink. Define resolution, she said, her tone surgical. Garrett smiled as if she'd just asked him what champagne he preferred. Of course, he replied. We're prepared to offer double the value of your original first-class fare, plus a guaranteed business class seat on our next departure to London. Wheels up in 90 minutes. Smooth transition, no further fuss. Vanessa raised one brow, arms folded. Business class. It's only a temporary downgrade, Garrett assured. His voice still coated in the patronizing softness men like him use to calm down women who refuse to be managed. We thought it might be the simplest path forward, for all parties involved. Vanessa stared at him for a long beat, letting the silence stretch until it became something heavy enough to crack bones. Then she spoke, each word a precision blade. You removed me from a seat I paid for. You falsely flagged me in your system. You allowed your staff to record and publicly humiliate me. Then you offered me a seat I didn't book after attempting to bribe me into silence. And now you use the word simplest. For who exactly? Garrett hesitated, his practiced demeanor slipping. Dr. Carter, this was never personal. Everything about this was personal, she cut in. But your mistake was treating me like a problem instead of a pattern. He opened his mouth again, but a sudden chime on Vanessa's phone interrupted him. She glanced at the screen. One new email, subject line, notice of access, suspension Skylux elite program. Her lips tightened. She tapped open. The body of the message was cold, corporate, and templated. Effective immediately. Your premium traveler privileges have been suspended pending review of security-related incidents on board Flight 204. This includes lounge access, boarding priority, and elite upgrade status. Vanessa scrolled to the bottom. A single italicized note read, System alert. Passenger flagged under code 89, potential reputational liability. She laughed, not loudly but sharply. The kind of laugh that comes after someone sets themselves on fire and still expects you to admire the match. She held the phone up to Garrett. So this is how you clean up messes now? You erase the guest instead of the issue. Garrett's smile faltered entirely. That was automatic, he said, the lie brittle. Security protocols we don't directly control. Then let me make this simple for you, Vanessa said. Reinstate my original seat, retract your false report, and issue a public correction acknowledging the breach of policy and misconduct by your crew. Garrett cleared his throat. Unfortunately, that would require approval beyond my. You had the power to suspend my entire status without approval, she said, voice rising just enough to draw the attention of 3 nearby staff. Don't insult me with bureaucratic theater. Garrett's face flushed pink. Dr. Carter, you need to understand how precarious this situation is becoming for everyone involved. Vanessa leaned closer. You should be more concerned with how historic it's about to become. I'm not the woman you eject and compensate. I'm the one you'll answer to when the board calls and asks why their partnership contract just froze mid-quarter. Garrett backed up a step. You wouldn't, it's already in motion, Vanessa replied calmly. This airline was preparing to announce a joint AI initiative funded by my foundation. That press release hits in 20 minutes. Or it doesn't. You decide. Garrett fumbled for his tablet. We could talk about this. No, Vanessa said, stepping past him, heading back toward the windowed wall overlooking the jetway. I'll wait here. You can either send someone with authority, or I'll call London and tell them your board declined to take accountability. Behind her, the air buzzed with whispered arguments and chaotic keystrokes from panicked executives still trying to regain control of a system that had slipped from their grasp. Garrett was now pacing in tight circles, calling someone he claimed was from corporate escalation. But the tightness in his voice betrayed the futility of his efforts. Vanessa remained still. She didn't need to rush. She had already moved first, and the ripple was about to become a wave. Just as a suited manager approached her again, a sudden voice cut through the tension. A high, clear sound that didn't come from any phone or intercom, but from a child, innocent and piercing. Mom. Mom. "That's her," the little boy shouted, tugging urgently at his mother's sleeve. "That's the doctor who saved Dad's life." From the TV, his voice cracked with excitement and awe, echoing across the polished floor of the waiting area like a thrown stone breaking through glass. Every conversation stopped. Heads turned. Even Garrett froze mid-sentence. Vanessa turned slowly, her expression unreadable. The boy, maybe 8 years old, wide-eyed and flushed with recognition, pointed straight at her. "I remember her face," he said to the now blinking crowd. "She was on that news thing. They said she fixed Daddy's brain tumor. You remember, right?" His mother looked from her son to Vanessa, confusion melting into realization. "Wait, oh my God," she murmured. "Dr. Vanessa Carter." A visible ripple swept through the terminal like a silent wave, recognition snapping from one face to another as names collided with headlines in the minds of onlookers. One woman gasped softly and pulled up her phone. Another muttered, "I knew I'd seen her somewhere." Garrett's face turned from pale to gray. Vanessa didn't gloat. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out her phone, and tapped a number from memory. She lifted it to her ear, her voice calm and deliberate. "Activate priority override protocol. Confirm timestamp. Flight 204 incident. Issue Tier 1 suspension to Atlantic West digital infrastructure until formal redress and executive contact is made." She paused, listening, then added, "Yes, immediate." The call ended in seconds. 5 minutes later, across the entire terminal, screens blinked once, then changed. The flight departure boards, once filled with green and white listings, now flickered and updated simultaneously. One by one, each listing under the Atlantic West Airlines column vanished. In its place, a red line scrolled in bold letters across every monitor. All Atlantic West departures temporarily suspended. Await further updates. We apologize for the inconvenience. Gasps echoed across the lounge. Phones lit up with notifications. Confused passengers gathered around screens, murmuring. A teenage girl near the coffee kiosk whispered, "Yo, is this some kind of cyber attack?" Her friend shook his head. "No, that lady did that. I saw her on TED Talks. She's not just a doctor. She builds the tech that controls half of this." Meanwhile, Garrett stumbled toward the lounge desk, frantically speaking into his mobile headset. "No, I don't care who you have to wake up." She pulled a full Tier 1 lockdown. "We just lost operational control of every gate. She shut us down. No, not her people. She is the system." Behind him, the woman from earlier, the mother of the boy, walked over to Vanessa slowly. "Dr. Carter, I'm so sorry," she said, voice trembling. "My husband, we owe you everything. He's alive because of you. I didn't recognize you before." Vanessa gave a slight nod, her face softening just a little. "No apology needed," she said gently. "Not from you." The woman's son stepped forward. "You're like Iron Man," he said, "but real." A slight smile touched Vanessa's lips. "Not quite, but I try." Suddenly, more voices began to rise around them, supportive, surprised, affirming. One elderly man with a cane muttered, "This is the woman they dragged off a plane." A young executive near the corner added, "My team's been studying her neural mapping protocols all quarter." Then, finally, a voice came from behind the boarding counter, firm, shaken, and deeply regretful. It was the airport's director of terminal operations. "Dr. Carter," he said, stepping forward, tie undone, eyes heavy with realization, "we'd like to speak with you. Properly. No more intermediaries." Vanessa turned to him with a slow, quiet gravity of a woman who had already won. "Then bring the right people," she said, "because I don't sit down for anyone who doesn't understand the weight of standing up." And with that, she returned to her seat near the window, legs crossed, phone silent, posture serene. The airport director hovered nearby, speaking into a headset with the urgency of a man relaying both prayer and confession. Garrett had vanished, perhaps to find an executive with enough clearance to undo what Vanessa had already set in motion, though no such person truly existed anymore. The monitors continued to flash their bold red message, "All Atlantic West departures suspended." Cameras rolled. News vans parked outside the terminal as whispers of the shutdown spread beyond the airport walls, bleeding into online feeds. Hashtags trending. Clips of Vanessa's quiet defiance already circulating with millions of views. And then came the moment they had all expected. The digital screen above Gate 12 flickered again and transitioned to a live stream, framed in corporate blue with the company's logo in the corner and a serious-looking man in a dark tailored suit sitting at a minimalist desk. The caption below read, "Live statement from Atlantic West CEO Michael Ronstadt." The room hushed as the man cleared his throat, hands folded on the glass table before him. "Good evening," he began, voice steady. "I'm Michael Ronstadt, CEO of Atlantic West Airlines. I want to begin by addressing today's unexpected disruption and offer my sincerest apologies to Dr. Vanessa Carter and all passengers affected by this unfortunate series of system failures." He inhaled, carefully choosing each word like it was pulled from a crisis PR handbook. "We deeply regret that a valued customer and respected global figure experienced procedural errors that compromised her rights, dignity, and security. We are investigating how our systems allowed these failures, and we will hold accountable any individuals who acted outside protocol. This does not reflect who we are." Vanessa watched with a blank expression, unmoved by his rehearsed contrition. The passengers around her watched the screen, some nodding, others frowning, their opinions already formed. Ronstadt continued, "I have personally reached out to Dr. Carter to offer a private apology and a direct resolution. We remain committed to working with her foundation on our upcoming health tech integration. We are also..." And then the feed cut, abruptly, mid-sentence. The screen flickered once, then faded to black. A few gasps rippled through the lounge. Phones buzzed with confusion. Someone near the bar whispered, "Did it crash?" A flight crew member murmured, "Technical glitch?" But Vanessa simply tapped her phone once and slipped it into her coat pocket. Then she stood, turning slowly to face the room. "It didn't crash," she said, voice firm yet clear. "I shut it down." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Even the director stopped moving. Vanessa stepped forward, her heels echoing with rhythmic finality. "Michael Ronstadt has not personally contacted me," she continued. "And any attempt to frame this event as a mere systems failure is not only dishonest, it's dangerous. Because this wasn't just a failure in code. It was a failure in culture." Her voice didn't rise, but it filled the space. "And here's what he didn't mention. The technology that Atlantic West uses for passenger verification, real-time flight optimization, and data compliance was developed in partnership with my institute. That's right. My name is on the grant that funded your security infrastructure. My algorithms power your gate-side AI. And my team has been negotiating a $900 million expansion deal with your executive board for a joint global health logistics program using your fleet." She paused, letting the number settle in the room like a bomb dropped in molasses. "So before any of you assume I'm just a passenger whose seat was reassigned, understand this. I am the architect of the system you tried to weaponize against me." Around her, jaws dropped. A middle-aged man whispered, "Jesus." The teenage girl from earlier blinked rapidly and opened her camera again. Vanessa turned slightly toward the cameras, now forming a half-circle around the lounge. What happened today wasn't a glitch. It was a reflection. It showed the world what still happens when power sees someone it doesn't expect in the spaces it reserves for itself. And let me be clear, I don't need their apology. I don't want compensation. What I want is for every gate agent, every board member, every algorithm designer, and every executive assistant who ignored my credentials, erased my name, flagged my profile, and live-streamed my humiliation, to know that I see them. She paused, breathing in deep. And I'm not walking away. The screen behind her remained dark. No attempt was made to restart the stream. Her digital silence was a deliberate strategy, a vacuum in which the entire world had to fill in the blanks. And they did furiously, obsessively, with headlines that screamed across news feeds. Doctor shuts down airline over racism allegations. AI innovator turns table on airline after discrimination. $900M deal suspended amid systemic bias probe. The company scrambled. Their first move was public and immediate, a press conference, hastily arranged on the steps of the airline's corporate headquarters, framed by flags and flanked by stiff-faced board members who looked more like defendants than executives. Vanessa did not attend. She watched the live stream from her office, arms folded, eyes cold. The interim CEO, a woman named Ellen Thorne, took the podium. Her voice was strained but determined. Effective immediately, she announced, Captain Thomas Kelly and lead flight attendant Britt Morrow have been terminated from their positions for conduct unbecoming and for direct violations of our professional integrity policy. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted questions. Ellen held up a hand and continued. Furthermore, all executive-level personnel and frontline crew will undergo mandatory inclusion and equity retraining under external audit supervision, with third-party oversight. Behind her, Garrett stood pale and stone-faced, stripped of his earlier smugness, now just another name on a list awaiting review. Vanessa leaned back in her chair and pressed play on the internal video leak that had gone viral. Britt's live stream from the plane, her mocking voice calling Vanessa a fake, a fraud, followed by the quiet moment when the boy in the lounge pointed at her and cried, "That's the doctor who saved my dad." The juxtaposition was cinematic, tragic, undeniable. But the fallout didn't stop at job terminations. Investors began pulling inquiries, freezing funds. Legal teams demanded transcripts and chat logs. One internal whistleblower revealed the existence of a Slack channel named Gate Gossip, where employees routinely posted pictures and snide comments about passengers they deemed suspicious. Vanessa's photo had been in there captioned, "She's probably somebody's assistant trying to flex." The comment had over 40 reactions. Most were laughing emojis. The investigation deepened. But perhaps the most unexpected consequence came from the passengers themselves. One by one, they began posting online, some defensive, some ashamed. Then, during a national morning talk show, one of them appeared in studio, a man named Curtis Mallard, mid-50s, who had sat 2 rows behind Vanessa and had whispered to his wife, "She doesn't belong up here." His face on screen was red and puffy, clearly emotional. "I didn't know who she was," he said to the interviewer. "But that's no excuse. The truth is, I didn't care who she was. I looked at her skin, her calm, her confidence, and I assumed she didn't deserve the space she was in. I thought I was just being honest. But now I know I was being something worse, silent and smug in the face of injustice." He wiped his eyes. "I looked up her work. She's saved lives. She saved that boy's father. She's changed entire fields. And I treated her like furniture that didn't match the room." Vanessa watched this too. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just watched. When the interviewer asked Curtis what he would say to her if she were in the room, he replied, "I would say, I'm sorry. Not just because I judged you, but because I robbed myself of learning from someone far better than me." The clip went viral. Millions of views. Hundreds of thousands of shares. But more importantly, it triggered a national conversation. Airlines everywhere began reviewing their training programs. Several corporations announced partnerships with inclusion specialists. And academic institutions invited Vanessa to lead keynote discussions about AI ethics, race, and institutional accountability. Still, Vanessa gave no speeches. Not yet. She focused instead on her team, on rebuilding trust within the organization she influenced, and on strengthening protections for professionals like her who too often were expected to endure silently. Months had passed since the flight that halted an airline upended careers and triggered sweeping reforms across an industry. But for Vanessa Carter, the real work had only just begun. She hadn't disappeared into headlines or victory laps. Instead, she returned to her rhythm, quietly expanding her initiatives, overseeing new grant disbursements, and mentoring a new generation of changemakers who had watched her rise not through spectacle, but through principle. Her office, located above a modest free clinic on the south side of Los Angeles, overlooked rows of weather-worn rooftops and streets humming with resilience. It was here she had always found her center, far from stages, far from cameras, among people who didn't know her for titles or funding rounds, but for sutures, soft words, and unflinching service. It was here, on a humid Friday morning, that the unexpected happened. A knock at the clinic door. Vanessa glanced up from a patient file, expecting a courier or a late arrival. Instead, standing on the threshold, was Britt Morrow, the former flight attendant who had once broadcast Vanessa's humiliation to thousands. She looked different now. No uniform, no makeup. Her eyes were tired, shoulders drawn inward, clutching a resume that trembled slightly in her hand. Vanessa said nothing at first, just studied her silently, noting the raw discomfort that now wrapped her like a second skin. Britt cleared her throat, voice almost a whisper. "I read your open letter last week. About systems. About healing. I don't deserve to be here, I know that. But I want to try." Vanessa leaned back, expression unreadable. "Try what?" Britt swallowed hard. "To help. I've been volunteering the past few months. At shelters, women's centers. I thought maybe I could join the intake desk. I know how to listen now. I didn't before." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her. "We don't hire people because they're perfect," she said, voice calm. "We hire people who've been broken enough to understand others who are too." Britt sat, tears glinting behind her lashes. "Thank you," she whispered. Vanessa offered her a glass of water, then returned to her work. Nothing more needed to be said. Forgiveness had never been about forgetting. It had been about choosing peace over vengeance, and allowing growth to bloom in places scorched by ignorance. 2 weeks later, Vanessa stepped onto a stage in Vancouver, the TED Summit's final keynote speaker. The auditorium pulsed with anticipation, cameras rolling, live streams feeding to millions around the globe. She stood in a simple navy dress, no podium, no notes, just her voice. "A few months ago," she began, "I boarded a flight expecting silence, rest, and anonymity. What I received instead was exposure, not just to myself, but of a pattern, a script, a system designed not to harm loudly, but to exclude quietly." The audience sat in rapt attention. "But this story isn't about revenge," she continued. "It's about responsibility. It's about what we do when we're given the rare opportunity not just to call out a flaw, but to rebuild the structure it lives in." Her gaze swept the room. "Let me be clear, I was angry. I still am some days. But I've come to understand something deeper. Forgiveness isn't for the people who wronged us. Forgiveness is for those of us who deserve to move forward without carrying their weight." She paused, letting the words settle. "I've been called powerful, influential, even dangerous. But I am, above all, someone who believes in the long game of change. Not cosmetic, not performative, real, measurable, lasting." She raised her hand slowly, as a slide illuminated behind her, showing a side-by-side image. One the moment she stood alone at the gate surrounded by security. The other, a recent shot of her standing at the ribbon cutting of a new mobile clinic in rural Georgia. "This," she said, pointing, "is what happens when we don't just survive injustice, we convert it into fuel, into foundation." The crowd erupted in a standing ovation. Later that evening, as the city lights blinked across the bay and messages poured in from strangers, allies, and skeptics alike, Vanessa sat alone in her hotel room, sipping tea, her mind already returning to the clinic, to her patients, to the intake logs she would review on Monday. She didn't need applause. She didn't need awards. What she needed, what she had always needed, was to know that the next time someone like her walked onto a plane, or into a boardroom, or through a door she herself had once been barred from, the world would think twice before closing it again. The end. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. What part of Vanessa's journey hit you the hardest? Was it the silence on the plane, the moment she took control, or the quiet forgiveness in the end? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts.